At Christmas brunch, Aunt joked, "Here comes the problem child." As every cousin quietly shifted closer to my chair, I was still halfway through taking my coat off when she said it. My scarf caught on one of the dining chairs, jerking me back a little, and my stupid first instinct was to mumble, "Sorry?" like I'd walked into her line of fire on purpose. The room smelled like cinnamon rolls and overdone bacon. Mariah Carey was playing too loud from the Bluetooth speaker, and 24 eyes did that quick flick from Aunt Carol's face to mine. My stomach did its usual flip, heat rushing up the back of my neck. But then something I didn't expect happened. Instead of laughing or staring down at their plates like they used to, my cousins started moving. Chairs scraped the hardwood. Jess patted the empty seat beside her. Adam grabbed my coat from my hand like he'd been waiting for an excuse to stand up. One by one, they made this subtle little migration, like some internal compass was pointing them toward me and away from her. We hadn't all been in the same room for Christmas in 3 years. The last time ended with me crying on the front porch while my dad hissed that I was ruining the holiday, and my mom kindly suggested I leave so everyone else could enjoy themselves. I did. I got in my car, drove back to my tiny apartment, and ugly cried into leftover Chinese food while everyone else posed in matching pajamas. That was the night I promised myself I wouldn't keep walking into the same fire and acting surprised when I got burned. Therapy happened after that. Boundaries happened after that. This brunch was my first big family event since I stopped being everyone's emotional punching bag. To understand why a dumb line at a Christmas brunch made my entire nervous system light up, you kind of have to understand the role I've played in my family my whole life. I'm 29F, youngest of 3. 2 older brothers, Mark and Ryan, who learned early that if they rolled their eyes and left the room whenever drama started, they could stay mostly neutral. I, on the other hand, didn't shut up. At 6, I told my dad it wasn't fair he yelled at Mom for buying herself a sweater but had a garage full of tools he never used. At 10, I told Aunt Carol that calling my cousin Thunder Thighs wasn't funny. At 13, I told my parents I was pretty sure my sadness was more than just hormones, and maybe I needed help. Every one of those moments earned me a label: difficult, sensitive, dramatic, ungrateful. Over time, they all got compressed into one: problem child. They never said it outright when I was little, not in those exact words. It was, "Here comes trouble," when I walked into a room. Or, "What did you do now?" when something broke. Or Mom sighing, "Can you just not today, Lily?" whenever I tried to bring up anything. The first time I heard problem child full on was at a 4th of July cookout when I was 17. I just told Aunt Carol's youngest that she didn't have to hug Uncle Mike if she didn't want to. He was drunk and grabby and she looked so uncomfortable. Carol pulled me aside, smiled too big, and through her teeth said, "Not everything needs your commentary, okay? You're always stirring the pot. You're the problem child of this family and it's exhausting." I believed her. That's the worst part. When enough people respond to your basic self-protection like it's an attack, eventually you start to wonder if you're the defective one. Fast forward a decade. I left home at 19 for college, moved back at 22 when my dad had a health scare and they needed help, but also somehow still managed to treat me like a teenager. By 26, I was working full-time, doing half the house chores, and listening to my mom cry about her marriage at midnight while my dad snored in the next room. I was also having panic attacks in my car before work and telling myself I was just tired. The Christmas blow-up 3 years ago wasn't one big dramatic thing. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. Dad making jokes at the table about how I still hadn't figured life out. Aunt Carol loudly asking when I was going to stop wasting time and get a real career. I do freelance design and marketing. Mark teasing me for still being on meds, like it was a phase I should have grown out of. I snapped when Mom told me to stop making faces, while Dad was mocking my job. I said, "I'm tired of being laughed at in my own family." They responded like I'd lobbed a grenade. That night, shaking on the porch, phone pressed to my ear as my best friend talked me through breathing, I realized I would never be able to convince them to treat me differently, while also continuing to show up and accept whatever they handed me. That's when boundaries stopped being a word I saw in Instagram infographics and became something my therapist and I wrote down on actual paper. Things like, I will hang up the phone if I'm being insulted or mocked. I will not attend gatherings where I know I'll be ganged up on. I will not explain therapy to people who mock it. I will leave if my dad starts yelling. Very basic stuff, but for someone raised on family first, even if it kills you, it felt like rebellion. The first year I followed through, I skipped Christmas entirely. Cue endless texts about how selfish I was, how much I hurt mom's feelings, how my nieces missed Auntie Lily. I cried. A lot. I also had the first quiet, non-adrenaline-fueled holiday of my adult life. Year 2, I agreed to swing by my parents' place on Christmas Eve for an hour. When Dad started in with, "Here comes trouble," and Mom laughed too loudly, I smiled, dropped off the dessert I'd baked, and left 10 minutes later when the mocking didn't stop. They called me oversensitive. I took a bath and watched cheesy movies and, again, didn't have a panic attack. Year 3 is this year. The year my parents finally realized I wasn't bluffing and decided to try a different tactic, pretending nothing had ever happened and inviting me to family Christmas brunch at Aunt Carol's, just like old times. I almost said no immediately. The text from Mom, "We'd really love to see you, honey. Things will be different, I promise," sat unread for a day on my phone while I went back and forth in my head. My therapist asked, "What would make it safe enough for you to consider going?" We came up with my conditions. It's brunch, not a whole day, so there's a built-in end. I drive myself so I can leave whenever. I leave if I get insulted more than once. Not zero tolerance, because expecting perfection from people who've never examined themselves is unrealistic, but also not death by 1,000 jokes like before. I don't stay out of guilt, so I said yes. Or more accurately, I said, "I can come for 2 hours. If things get mean, I'll leave." Mom replied, "Of course it won't. We're just happy you'll be there." She put a heart emoji. It felt like being invited back into the fold as long as I behaved. Which brings us back to Aunt Carol sing-songing, "Here comes the problem child," while I stood in her hallway holding a Tupperware of roasted vegetables like a shield. She was by the kitchen island, coffee mug in one hand, mimosa in the other, classic Carol, decked out in an aggressively red cardigan with a glittering reindeer brooch. She turned as I stepped into the dining room doorway, eyes sweeping down and up in that evaluative way she has, like she's scanning for vulnerabilities. "Well, well, well," she said. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence. Here comes the problem child." My body reacted before my brain. Shoulders up, jaw tight, heart thudding. I felt myself start to smile automatically, a tight, apologetic thing, and then I stopped. I didn't plaster anything on my face. I just stood there. That's when my cousins moved. Jess, who's my age and used to join in on the teasing, scraped her chair back and said, a little too loudly, "Lily, sit next to me. I saved you a seat." She hadn't. There was a random coat on the chair that she grabbed and flung over another one. Adam, older than me by 2 years, stood up so fast his chair almost toppled. "Here, let me take that," he said, reaching for the Tupperware and my coat in one go, like he was intercepting more than vegetables. His younger sister, Becca, shifted her chair so there was actually room for mine between her and Jess. It wasn't some dramatic slow-motion scene. It was small, almost easy. But to me it felt like the axis tilted a degree. I heard the scrape of my dad's fork against his plate. Out of the corner of my eye I saw him watching, expression unreadable. Mom was already fussing with napkins, pretending everything was normal. Aunt Carol's smile went stiff. "Oh, so we're all sitting together now, are we?" she said, that too bright tone sliding over something sharp. "Yeah," Jess said lightly. "We're catching up." Then she looked at me, really looked, and did something she's never done in our adult lives. She hugged me in front of everyone. A quick, slightly awkward half-hug over the back of my chair, but still. "Hey you," she murmured. "Glad you came." I swallowed hard, sat down, and felt my heart beating in my ears. The first half hour of brunch was small talk on steroids. Work, weather, kids' school, someone's new car. Eggs, bacon, pancakes, the whole spread. I answered questions about my job. Yes, working from home is still real work even if I'm in sweatpants sometimes. About my apartment, yes, the neighborhood's safe. About my health in the vaguest way possible. I'm doing a lot better these days, thanks. There were still little jabs. Dad did his "don't ask Lily to carve the ham. She'll find a way to make it political" joke. Aunt Carol asked if I was still doing that feelings doctor thing, complete with air quotes. Mom laughed too loudly at both comments, the way you laugh when you're trying to sound relaxed and just sound strained. The difference was, they didn't land the same way. Every time someone took a shot, I felt Jess's knee bump mine under the table, or Becca roll her eyes theatrically, or Adam pointedly change the subject. Once, when Aunt Carol asked if my brain pills were working yet, Adam actually said, "Carol, come on," in this weary voice that made her blink. 3 years ago, I'd have absorbed each comment like tiny poisons, smiled, and then sobbed in my car. This time, I let myself notice the micro-supports, the cousin's subtle shifts. The way my youngest cousin, Max, 16 and surgically attached to his phone, glared at her like she'd insulted a friend of his. Halfway through the meal, Aunt Carol leaned back in her chair, wineglass in hand. She'd moved on from mimosas, and did her usual "let's perform a family moment" thing. "So," she said, clinking her fork against her glass, "since we're all actually together for once, how about we go around and say what we're grateful for this year?" I internally groaned. Gratitude circles in this family are weaponized. It always ends with someone performing how grateful they are for strong family values, while staring at whoever's currently out of favor. People went around, jobs, kids, promotions, surviving the pandemic, blah blah. It got to me, and I could feel Aunt Carol's eyes on me, waiting. "I'm grateful for choosing myself," I heard myself say. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "And for people in my life who respect that." You could have heard a pin drop. Dad snorted. "Always has to be about you," he muttered. Jess turned her head sharply. "That's literally the point of gratitude, Uncle Paul," she said. "It's personal." Aunt Carol laughed, high and brittle. "Well, we're all grateful Lily decided to join us instead of sulking at home this year," she said. "We really missed our little problem child, didn't we?" She looked around like she expected a chorus of agreement. That's when Max, sweet, quiet, usually avoiding eye contact Max, said without looking up from his phone, "She's not the problem, Aunt Carol. You are." The air got sucked out of the room. My fork clattered against my plate. My heart climbed into my throat so fast I actually put a hand on my chest. Carol's smile snapped off like a light. "Excuse me?" she said. Max shrugged, finally lifting his gaze. "Just saying what everyone thinks," he said. "You call people names and make fun of their mental health and then act hurt when they don't show up. That's messed up." "Messed up?" Jess echoed under her breath. I wanted to disappear and also record the moment from every angle. At the same time, a wave of nausea rolled over me, because conflict like this never ends cleanly in our family. "Is this what you've been telling the kids about me?" Carol demanded, looking at Adam and his wife. Adam sighed. "Nobody has to tell us anything, Carol," he said. "We're all sitting here. We can hear you." I felt Mom shrink into herself across the table. Her hand fluttered to her throat. "Can we not do this today?" she said, voice small. "It's Christmas." I opened my mouth to say, "It's always Christmas or Easter or someone's birthday or Dad's blood pressure or anything but the actual issue," but I stopped myself. I don't need to be the family narrator anymore. My cousins had the mic. Carol's gaze snapped back to me, like this was my doing. "You really have poisoned them against me with all your therapy talk, haven't you?" she said. I took a breath, felt my feet on the floor, heard my therapist in my head. "Slow. Ground. You get to choose how you respond." "I haven't been talking about you at all, actually," I said. "Therapy isn't about you. It's about me not falling apart every time someone treats me like a joke." Dad pushed his chair back slightly. So now we're all abusers because we make jokes? He said. Give me a break, Lily. Nobody said abusers, I replied. My hands were shaking, so I wrapped them around my coffee mug. I'm saying I don't like being called a problem child, and I'm allowed to say that without it being a federal offense. It's just a nickname, Carol snapped. You were a handful growing up, always arguing, always stirring the pot. We're just being honest. I was a child pointing out when adults were hurting people, I said, my voice rising despite my best effort to keep it calm. If that's stirring the pot, maybe the pot needed stirring. The room buzzed. The kids at the far end had gone quiet. Adam put a hand on Max's shoulder. Jess spoke up again, surprising me. You realize you only call her that because she doesn't roll over, right? She said to Carol. Lily got labeled the problem child because she's the only one who ever pushed back. The rest of us just shut up so we wouldn't be next. Becca nodded. You called me dramatic for crying when Uncle Mike made fun of my acne, she said to Carol, eyes shining. Lily was the only one who told you to stop. You punished her for it. That's why we all moved closer when she walked in. It's obvious. I wanted to crawl under the table and also hug them all and also vomit. My brain was ping-ponging between holy crap they noticed and you're making this worse and this is what accountability looks like and you should leave right now. Carol's face went through a slideshow of emotions. Shock, anger, wounded pride. I can't even speak in my own home without being attacked, she said. That's fine. I see how it is. I'm the big bad wolf and Lily's the poor little victim. There it was. Victim. The word this family fears more than anything. I took another breath. I'm not a victim, I said. I'm just done pretending things don't hurt me so you and Dad can feel comfortable. Dad snorted. There she goes again, making everything about her feelings. Something in me snapped, but not in the screaming throw-a-plate way. More like a rubber band finally reaching its limit and just not stretching anymore. I actually didn't bring any of this up, I said. You did. With the nickname, I was prepared to sit here, eat some eggs, and leave in an hour. You decided to start with problem child. You don't get to poke a bruise and then get mad when people say, ow. Silence. My heart pounded in my ears. Mom did her little nervous laugh. She's right, she said weakly. We did say we'd be kinder this year. I turned to look at her. It was the first time she'd taken even half a step toward my side of the line, and it landed in this weird, sideways way. Carol stood up abruptly, chair scraping loud against the floor. Well, I'm sorry you're all so thin-skinned now, she said. Next time I'll send a formal apology before I say anything. She stalked into the kitchen, muttering about ungrateful children. The tension broke like a smell. Everyone exhaled at once. The kids started talking again in low voices. Dad stared at his plate, jaw clenched. I should go, I said quietly, pushing my chair back. My legs felt wobbly. Jess grabbed my wrist. No, she said. Stay, please. I hesitated. My old instinct would have been to bolt, to escape before anything worse happened. My new instinct, the one I'm still getting used to, asked, what do you want? I wanted to be anywhere that wasn't that room, honestly. But I also didn't want my leaving to turn into another story about how I stormed out. I'm going to step outside for a minute, I said. Get some air. Adam stood. I'll come, he said. I need a smoke. He quit 3 years ago. The smoke was code for, I want an excuse to leave too. We walked onto the back deck. The air was cold enough to sting my lungs. Someone had strung fairy lights along the railing. They made little halos in the fog. Hey, Adam said after a minute. That was intense. I laughed weakly. Understatement. He leaned on the railing, breath puffing white. I'm sorry, he said, for all the times I laughed along, for not saying anything sooner. I knew it was crap what they did to you. I don't know. I didn't want to be next. It was such a simple admission and it hit me harder than any insult. Thanks, I said. My throat felt tight. For today too. For, not leaving me hanging. He shrugged. Honestly, Max beat us all to it, he said, smiling a little. Kids got more backbone than I did at his age. We stood in silence for a bit. I could hear muffled voices inside, the clink of dishes. I half expected someone to burst out onto the deck and demand we apologize. It didn't happen. Are you okay staying? Adam asked eventually. Because if you want to go, I'll make an excuse and we can both bail. I'll say I have to take you to the ER for an allergic reaction to bullshit. I barked out a laugh. The image of Aunt Carol's face if we said that almost made staying worth it. I think I'll finish my coffee and then head out, I said. I already made my point. I don't need to sit through round 2. Fair, he said. For what it's worth, me and Jess have a group chat called Chaos Kids where we talk about this stuff. You're welcome in if you want. The idea that my cousins had a secret support group just existing while I thought I was alone all these years, that one was going to take a while to process. Maybe, I said, smiling a little. Send me the link. We went back inside. The atmosphere had shifted. Quieter but not explosive. Carol was clattering dishes in the kitchen. Dad was scrolling his phone like a teenager. Mom was wiping an already clean spot on the table. The kids were on the floor with their new toys. I finished my coffee, ate one more cinnamon roll because trauma calories don't count, said my goodbyes. Mom hugged me at the door. You know your aunt loves you, she murmured. I resisted the urge to say, she loves the idea of me being quiet. Instead, I said, I know how she acts. That's enough information. Mom pulled back, frowning like I'd spoken in code she didn't understand. You'll come next year? She asked. I'll see how things are, I said, which was both honest and non-committal enough to soothe her. On the drive home, my hands shook on the steering wheel. I replayed every line, every flinch, every eye roll. The shame came in waves. You made a scene. You made it about you. You're confirming everything they think. Then the other voice, quieter but steadier. You didn't start it. You told the truth. You left when you needed to. You weren't alone. My phone buzzed at a red light. A new group chat. Chaos Kids Collision. Members. Jess, Adam, Becca, Max, and me. Jess, proud of you today. Adam, seconded. Becca, thirded. Maybe fourthed? Max, sorry if I made it weird. I just got mad. Me, you didn't make it weird. Thank you. All of you. Jess replied with a voice note. For the record, she said, when Aunt Carol said problem child and we all moved toward you, that wasn't planned. It just happened. I think we were all done letting you sit there by yourself. I turned the volume down and let myself cry a little at the next red light. Not the panicked, humiliated crying I was used to after family events. A weird, achy, almost relieved kind of crying. I'm not about to pretend everything is fixed now. Carol will probably tell anyone who will listen that I ruined Christmas with my therapy talk. Dad will probably double down on his jokes to prove he's not intimidated by his own kid. Mom will keep trying to smooth it over instead of looking at her part in it. But something shifted this year that I didn't expect. The cousins I thought were just bystanders quietly chose a side, and it wasn't hers. At Christmas brunch, Aunt joked, "Here comes the problem child," expecting everyone to laugh like they always have. Instead, chairs scraped, bodies moved, and my so-called problems pulled people in rather than pushing them away. Maybe I am the problem in the sense that I am a problem for the way things have always been. And maybe, finally, that's not a bad thing.